that nurturance equals mom. So someone gains weight, they come, and they're like, oh, I put on, 25 pounds around my butt. I've never been, fat before. We have to ask questions. We ask, when did that start? Did anything happen around that time? I think I might have told you this last week. I had a friend who had gained 50 pounds, I think it was. And when I started asking her, she was a scuba diver. And they took her from the scuba diving, from the water, they put her in admin. And the weight that she was carrying on was the weight of the equipment. Because her identity was tied into being in the water and doing what she does down there, not being in an office. So it's not always your dog or your child, it could be equipment, but it's related to identity. Fat and body image is related to the entity, the who am I? And the reason that it is linked to who am I is because if you're a child growing in your mom's body and then they take you out and you're here, who are you? What happened to this cozy, warm casing? You're kind of left cold and alone. What was that?
Life happened.
Exactly. Cold, hard life. And all of a sudden you're there and you're like, take me back to the room. What do I do with this? Bright lights, cold. Oh my God, I need to feel cozy again. And psychologically, the child wishes to go back home, to go back into the womb. Some people are more prone to this than others. If you got the nurturer on your archetype, number 4, you have a tendency to that. If you have a lot of Cancer in your chart, you have a tendency to that. If you're a caretaker by nature, you're a tendency to that. So those of us attracted to this field, because we have been disconnected from source, and we're like, who am I? And there's this good book that's called, Are You My Mother? Are You My Mother? Are You My Mother? And the animal keeps going to all these little animals saying, are you my mother? Are you my mother? And this is very much aligned with the orphan archetype and with the innocent archetype. Because orphans are forced to grow up, but they don't know who their parents are, so they're left with a void. And innocents don't want to grow up, so they're constantly holding on to something or someone that can play surrogate mom, and weight is often the issue. And if there is no mom, if there is no safety, if there is no anything, where do they find the equivalency of a hug or of a love? In food. So oftentimes when we are doing this action, it's because we're trying to fill the void in here, and then we eat and we eat and we eat, and this never ever ever gets filled.
Is that also because when you're in the womb, you're always having the nutrients fed by the mom through the umbilical cord, that you're always
Absolutely.
So you
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. So this really oftentimes, especially with people that deal with eating disorders, develop some sort of narcissism because what happens? If my mother is happy, I'm building in her. She's feeling fulfilled. She is taking her body, breaking it down to create my body. Mother has a purpose, baby has a purpose. When we are giving or teaching another person that my role in my life is to serve you, or your role in your life is to please me, we are creating narcissistic tendencies. That's why children come to meet the parents' needs. Because now you've come out of the womb, and it doesn't matter, the story continues. Get good grades, clean the house. What?
Get manners, behave.
Right, you behave. And so mom is so happy that the baby is such a good kid, and the baby is so happy that he's crowned king, and you have a very dysfunctional relationship between the parent and the child because they believe that no other person can sort of give them what the other is giving them. So it becomes somewhat unhealthy. So,
I wish my kids were more clean or doing
I had a client,
Kids don't wanna do nothing.
well, but part of that has to do with your upbringing. That you had to raise yourself. And instead of doing it differently, we do the opposite. So what you're trying to do is not do to your children what your mother did to you. And that's what most of us tend to do.
Like
Okay?
like their rooms are impeccable, I can't complain. But when it comes to doing anything, like in the living room or the kitchen, all you hear is, okay. And then they'll go. But like I have to tell them every single time, hey, can you wash the dishes? Or can you pick up that stuff in the living room? Can you pick up your shoes by the front door? Stuff like that. But if not, it'll just sit there forever because they won't do anything. But in their rooms, they do everything. They like their stuff, like, I think they both have OCD or something.
Well, so the responsibility of the parent, if you believe in that, is to tell them over and over and over again.
I repeat a billion times, always.
And that's just kids, right? Because
Yeah.
they're not just gonna do it just because. And it's actually a sign of health.
Yeah.
That's actually a sign of health. When I was a little girl, my father bought my mother brand new tile for this house. The tile turned out to be defective. And when you buy tile, it comes with like a sealant. Well, this tile didn't have sealant. It had these lacy grooves, but no sealant. So all the dirt would get stuck. Imagine a piece of lace throughout the whole house. So I wanted to please my mother so much that on Saturday and Sunday mornings, the only way that you could clean this tile would be with muriatic acid.
Oh my gosh.
And I would get muriatic acid, and I would be on my knees, cleaning and cleaning the grooves, so that when my mother would wake up, her house would look clean. My mother never asked me to do this. I felt obligated, or I felt that I would be loved, or I felt I would be honored, whatever. It was my narcissism, it was my issue. What I learned, if I pleased my mom, then I would get love in return.
Yeah, that was
And of course, she was always very happy and said, oh my God, you don't have to do that, but I did. And I remember one weekend doing it, and the neighbors all came over, I think it was around Christmas time, and they came over and it had been muddy outside. And they walk into the house and they put mud all over the front of the house, and I just fall on the floor crying. Because no matter how much I cleaned that floor, I could never make it better. It was never going to solve the problem,
right.
you know. Eventually they got new floor and sealed it and whatever, and that was the end of that. But for years and years and years, that felt to me almost like an obligation.
Or like a punishment you did to yourself.
Well, of course, because I love to punish myself, but it was more about looking to help my mom.
Right.
How could I get love from this person who birthed me? How can I meet this person's needs? Because unless we're meeting their needs, then we're not worthy. And this is a big issue with weight. When we take on excess weight, we're taking on a problem that we may not have a solution to. So therefore, we carry it depending on where you carry the weight. Okay, so first you ask your client, you can do this to see how distorted. You ask them what fits in there. Okay, her children fit in her excess. That means that part of her wants to keep those children close, which would make perfect sense considering Marcia's story that she was kicked out. When you were 12, how much did you weigh when you were kicked out?
I didn't weigh more than 100 pounds.
Okay. She didn't weigh more than 100 pounds. And now she wants to lose between 80 to 100 pounds. She wants her kids close, but really what she wants is her mom to have her close. To her mom to have tied her real tight and held that. No, it's never going to happen. It's past. But in the psyche, remember, the subconscious does not grow up.
Baby Marsha wants her mommy.
No, I don't.
The subconscious is always
Baby Marsha.
the age of the trauma. Always. At 12 years old, your mom, the same excess that you had, is attached to your string. It is you plus the baby that you were that got thrown out. And the only way you can do it is by keeping your kids close, because you can't go back to 12, you can't tie yourself to your mother. But subconsciously, the excess represents something. You can actually measure it, or you can ask the client. You can take it in inches, you can take it in centimeters, you can take it however you want. The client has the answer. So there is a need for 12-year-old Marcia to be protected. And where would you say is the area that you most carry the extra weight? In your thighs. And what is the purpose of the thighs?
To be grounded, to be like safe, right? To stay put.
Okay, so there is a groundedness, but think of the thighs. What are we doing with the thighs?
Walking, sitting down, I don't know. I don't know.
What in the thigh area needs to be protected?
In the thigh area?
This is second chakra. Were you protected sexually as a child?
No.
The fact that there is excess weight around that center is a way to protect yourself from abuse, from not being easily maybe wide open. It serves a purpose. And the other, and you said it before, is if I fall, I'm going to fall on a pad of cushion.
That I've done my whole life.
Okay, it's not going to hurt so much because you fall and you pick yourself up, and you fall and you pick yourself up. So the accumulation of the weight is located for a function. It has a function. We are not just accumulating weight for no reason. And when we investigate and we ask the client, we can start to see that there's something there, that it has a purpose. Now, what happens with parents and children? When the child leaves the mother's womb, that child is now sort of like, well, what's my purpose? I'm no longer in the womb. I need to keep sort of answering or honoring or helping this person, right? Because that's my job. And mother and child create some really unhealthy relationships, especially mother and baby, mother and daughter, where they're sort of related to one another. So a lot of times, the mother will have expectations on the daughter that the daughter doesn't necessarily want. You know, be a certain way, live a certain lifestyle, you should look this way, you shouldn't look that way, you should do this, you shouldn't do that.
It's my mom every time I see her.
And so that self-criticism that auto-criticism can turn into various things. First of all, it can turn into an eating disorder. It can turn into hypoglycemia. And it can turn into autoimmune. Eating disorders are directly related to vomiting or eliminating food. Food is nurturance. Nurturance is the boob. It's your mother. So people that have a tendency to vomit are literally like grossed out or vomiting the nurturance that their mother gives them because it might be criticism, criticism, criticism. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not this enough. Who the hell wants to swallow that? Hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is when your blood sugar drops below normal blood levels, okay? And you get weak and you can faint. Hypoglycemia has directly to do with disgust. If any of you ever walk by a mirror and look at yourself and you're disgusted, you are prone to having hypoglycemia. Okay? There is a disgust with yourself. I had a client a few weeks ago, and I light the altar, and I feel this sense of disgust. And I said to her, you have this disgust within you. And I was telling her what that was. She goes, yeah, absolutely. My father has a tendency to hypoglycemia. And one day I texted him, and I said, what disgusts you? And he responded. It had nothing to do with his mother. And I was really surprised at the answer. But if you ask someone with hypoglycemia what disgusts them, or where they get disgusted, that's going to be a key thing to a trauma that they have. Okay? Hypoglycemia is disgust. Because you never get enough sugar, you never get enough nutrition, you never get enough sweetness to live in that space of, let's say, sweet or love or stability in terms of what you need in terms of nutrition. So hypoglycemic people have this ongoing disgust. It's usually within themselves. And then autoimmune disease has to do with such negative criticism I call it the disease where you have a bag of stones and you're constantly beating your stones, or I give you a bag of stones and I say, throw it at me, just, peg me with the stones. That's what autoimmune disease is. And autoimmune disease could be, something like lupus, could be something like diabetes, We're seeing a lot of it now with Crohn's disease. We're seeing a lot of it related to GI. We're on the rise. And it's directly related to negative self-talk. The worse and worse and worse I talk about myself, I'm basically beating down my body so that my body doesn't work.
So that's crazy because during those years, I was real bad. Like, I started getting like how I would hear all this stuff being said to me. I believed it to the point where I would say it to myself. Like every bad thing that my mom ever said to me, or my husband during that time, because it's crazy how there's so much alike. But, you know, thank God at these past couple of years, if he wouldn't have changed the way he did, like there is no way I would be with him right now, I can tell you that. Like, because it's just like my mom, if I could get a million miles away from her, that's what I want to do right now. I can't deal with it anymore. But I got to the point where there was one time, I've never done nothing like this to myself, and I never want to get back to that point, to the point where I actually, from that day on, I promised myself and I completely got away from being that type of person. Because I started hating myself. Like, I'll never forget that. It was so bad. And I kept telling myself, like, Dad, how can you do this to yourself, you know? Because I was like that was like the lowest point of my whole life, even worse than like I was when I was on the street. Worse than all the times where I didn't have no one, you know? And it felt like I was with no one, even though there were people around me at that time. And I remember not even caring, like I didn't even want to live anymore. Like for so long, I kept telling myself, like, just take me, or like I don't want to live no more. And I started doing really crazy stuff. I mean, I started taking pills. I mean, I was doing crazy stuff to myself. And it got to the point where I was like, you know, like, how could you do this when you've been through so much worse, you know, over just hearing people say things to you, like, how are you letting yourself get like this? And that was like, I look back at that sometimes and I'm like, it's crazy to feel that way. And I had like my back up against the wall, basically. Like that's how I felt. Like I felt like I was cornered in a corner, and just leave me there. Like I literally would even say, you're just scum. You know, you're a piece of chewed up gum underneath someone's shoe. That's exactly how I would talk to myself all the time. And then there was always a little something in me always talking to me, like, you know, that little thing, like a little person next to you on your shoulder, like talking to you, telling you, man, what the heck? Like, you know you're not this, you know you're not that. And I was just like, please, like, all the time. And it was horrible because I was like getting worse with my health. I was stressed out, back-to-back things happening to me. Even during that time is when I fell down some steps, and I ended up having cranial surgery because I found out I was born with a condition I never knew about, and it just got to the point where I had to tell myself, if you're gonna continue on like this, you really are going where you want to be, and which was I didn't want to be alive anymore. And that's when I literally had to, you know, change my whole life around. And it took a long time to get to where I'm at right now. And man, I never want to go back to any of that. Like my life now is like the best I've ever felt in my life, just being myself. I'm like an open book. Anything you want to know about me, I have no secrets. I say what I have to say. I'm there for, you know, I understand so many people that, like, even when people come up to me, it's crazy how there's so many people that come up to me and tell me stories about their life that is exactly like mine. And I'm able to be there for them now. But I can tell you that those, during that time, like if somebody would have came up to me, I think I would have ruined them even worse, you know, than what they're going through now. And it's a great feeling to be how I am now. The only thing that I'm constantly fighting is this. That's the only thing I'm unhappy with. And like, even when I ever go around my mom and she's like constantly talking about my weight, I'm like that, I just don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything, like, because I'm trying. Like I've done everything I could possibly do, like with everything the doctors say and everything, but then I barely even eat. If you only knew, like I barely eat. I'm constantly, well, I'm doing the intermittent diet without even really trying. Because I really don't eat. I don't get hungry at all. And then I don't sleep, which is worse.
Well, because the function, or one of the functions of fat is protection. And it doesn't seem that you're really away from the source of danger. Your mom was a big source of danger. And I said this a couple weeks ago, it's very difficult to reconcile that this person is in our life and trying to figure out how someone who hurt us, parents, should be, or how they're to be in our life. It's a difficult one. So I want you to close your eyes and just take a deep breath. And I want you to just go to the place where you're most dissatisfied with your weight. And just focus on that area. And I want you to see all the little cells sizzling and communicating. And silently ask them what they're doing there. What are they protecting you from? Let them answer, not your mind. What do they say?
I just think it's to me, it's just hurt.
Protecting you from being hurt. Okay. So close your eyes and go back there and ask them who hurt you that you still need to protect yourself from.
I know exactly who it is.
Say it.
My mother.
So now close your eyes and ask them, is this fat really protecting you from your mother? And if so, how?
Wow.
It's not protecting you from your mother.
It's not.
So can you ask those cells what they can do in order to release you of this uncomfortable, because it's obviously uncomfortable in your body, and if they can give you another solution of how you can be protected from your mother?
basically like a release, like, like, to me, it's like more like a, I don't even know how to explain it, like the only feeling I get is like is that to get away, you know, like, because the only